next guest delivers the goods. He has been a contributor over at the Sporting News, Pro Football Weekly, the Sports Exchange. Of course, he's a Pro Football Hall of Fame voter, and we'll get into some of that today as well. A host over at Sirius XM Radio, of course, the Cards Wire, and celebrating 50 years of covering the NFL and the NFL draft, paving the way for guys like Mel Kiper Jr. and myself. He is Howard Balzer, and he joins us here on the All Access Football Daily Show from the desert. Good morning, Howard. How are we doing today?
Doing great. October 1st, like you said, and this just fulfills the prophecy that I have every year when we finally get to week one in the NFL after the long offseason, longest offseason in any professional sport that there is. And it gets everybody just panting and waiting and anticipating. And then I always say, though, that in about 8 weeks, we're going to be snapping our fingers and saying, oh, my goodness, how did half the season go by already? Now, of course, it's not 8 anymore, like more like 9 weeks is the official halfway point of the season. But here we are, basically, a little less than a quarter of the way through, and it seems like it just started yesterday. This season always flies by, and Here we are again, heading into October, heading into week 5. Our first teams will be on bye this week, and we'll be treated to that for a number of weeks with teams not playing. But that's the NFL. That's how it rolls every year, and it just flies by. The season goes very, very quickly. It's always interesting to me, Rick, when you'll hear coaches say when the season opens, they'll always talk about how you need 4 weeks or so at least to really get a feel of what teams are. Defenses are usually ahead of the offense. But then they always say, but we've got a long ways to go. Yeah. And I often think, well, no, it might feel like it, but then all of a sudden, like I said, you're there and you're going, oh my goodness, we're really moving fast here. So it goes a lot quicker, I think, than a lot of people realize.
No, it's so true. It flies by in the blink of an eye, and we're suddenly now just 204 days away from the 2026 NFL draft. But who's keeping track, right? You mentioned it every week, and last week was no different. 10 one-score games and a tie this past week in the NFL, and it really has become a battle of one-possession ball games, hasn't it?
Oh, it definitely has. And one of these days, each week I say, I got to go through all the schedule and see where all teams sit. You don't want to do that too early, because if you say a team's 1-0 and one-score games or two, whatever it might be, but it makes a huge difference. Obviously, the teams that are left standing at the end of the year, most of the time, are teams that are able to find ways to win those one-score games. And you make 10 in week 4. That gives us only in 4 weeks. There's been 64 games played, obviously, right? 38 have been one-score games.
Unbelievable.
38, and 18 have been decided by a field goal or less. And it's just, it's just crazy. Another number where 18 comes in, Rick, is that 18 game-winning scores this season have come in the final 3 minutes of the game. 18. That's of 64. I mean, that's a pretty high, percentage. Then you start looking at other things, like there's been 11 special teams touchdowns. To me, that's been one of the kind of talked about, but not that much stories of the beginning of this season, are the special teams, touchdowns, blocked field goals. And yet the flip side is, here's a number that's astounding. And I saw a story either yesterday or the day before with Vic Fangio talking about these long distance field goals, which now just seem to be no big deal in the NFL, with teams. Hey, if you got a guy with a leg, hey, we'll try a 60-yard plus field goal. And certainly you pick your spots, because you don't want to do that at the wrong time because of field position. But so far this season, there have been 77 field goal attempts of 50 yards or more, and kickers have made 56. I mean, that's just a crazy percentage. And there's been 7 60-plus yard field goals attempted, and 4 of them have been successful. So Fangio believes it's because of the K-ball and how they gave the kickers
a
whole bunch of balls before the season that they could work to do whatever.
They doctor them. Yeah, they doctor them all season.
And then they pick the ones they want for a given week. In the past, the kickers would get the ball about an hour and a half before the game and quickly do some stuff. But now they've changed that. But here's the thing I always say, right? Okay, yes, that will affect distance. There's no doubt about that. It's in some weird ways, it's almost like the whole steroid debate in baseball. No question that the power and the distance was affected, but you still got to hit the ball at the right spot on the bat for it to matter. Same thing with these field goal kickers. Yeah, they got the long distance, but the accuracy is just incredible. I mean, I always have thought this when they set up the field goal and the camera's behind, obviously, and boy, even on 40-yard field goals, those uprights seem they're a long way away. But for these kickers, it doesn't seem to matter anymore. I don't even think they really look at it. They just look, okay, there's where it is. Boom, that's my target point. But the accuracy, the number of these field goals that go basically right down the middle, to me, is phenomenal. That has nothing to do with the K-ball, I don't believe. I really don't.
Really? Yeah.
Well, the K-ball, when you work it in and all that, maybe it affects it a little bit, but the accuracy is just like golf. No matter how much they've improved the ball in golf and it travels long ways, it's still a matter of hitting the fairway, right? And so that's the accuracy to me is just really the big story of what these kickers are able to accomplish right now on a consistent basis.
No, it's incredible. And I did see Fangio's statement there, and he said, Brandon Aubrey's going to kick a 70-yard field goal this year. You can book that. And if you're the Dallas Cowboys, you don't even need to get across the 50, right? If you're on your own 40, you can trot out Aubrey for a field goal attempt. Now, I'm on the other side of the fence with these K balls. Is that what they're calling them? These doctored balls that the kickers just get to keep in their little cubby hole all season and work the molasses. And I don't know, it seems a little bit like an uneven playing field, especially when the NFL made such a big deal about Deflategate. Are the officials measuring the PSI on these field goal attempts when the ball is out there on every kick? I don't see them doing that. So how do we know the PSI, the air gauge? I mean, I do think there is some kind of benefit from having your own ball as opposed to a brand new shiny ball, which isn't going to get the same kind of traction. And you still got to be accurate, but I do think there is for guys who do know how to work those balls. I mean, there is a little bit of a competitive advantage, no?
Well, no, I mean, there's no question that that's a big part of it. And it used to be that you would just use the same ball that was in play. This goes back many, many years. Whatever ball is in play, that ends up being the ball that's used for the kicker. Then they changed that to make it different balls, and that's what the K ball was. What they've changed, obviously, they've gone back and forth on it in terms of when the players can get to them. There was one stretch of time where they weren't allowed to do anything to them. They were just in this little bag, and then they bring out that ball, for the kick. But in terms of an advantage, I mean, they all have the ability to do it. I can't believe there's any kickers that don't know how to do it and or what to do. And and the coaches, obviously, the special teams coaches certainly know. And so if anyone's not doing it, that's on them. Now, I'm not saying that, we can debate whether it's good for the game overall to do that with the kickers. And that's an interesting debate. But in terms of a competitive advantage, like I said, they all have the ability to do it. And so then it just comes down to actually doing it. You mentioned that 70-yard field goal. I mean, what the heck? Cam Little of the Jaguars hit a 70-yarder in the preseason, right? But, but again, it still comes down to at what point are you going to try those kicks? Because, I mean, obviously, if you're trying a 70-yard kick at some point in the game, you miss, then the other team's getting the ball, at the plus 40-yard line, right? And is that, 40, 60, and another 10. Yeah, so you don't want to give away that field position. But near the end of the half, near the end of the game, certainly there's no true downside to doing that in key situations. Now, if it's a tie game, then you got a tough decision, from these coaches, because if there's time on the clock and you don't make one of those, then all of a sudden like I said, you're giving the other team the ball. And a lot of it could depend on who the other team's kicker is. Hey, do we want to take that chance of a miss and then putting the other team almost immediately in field goal, not in field goal position, but not needing a whole lot, to get there. So it's definitely affecting the strategy of the game and a lot of different things. So just another thing to think about, during games on Sundays and Mondays and
Uh,
Thursdays.
I think it's something to think about too when it comes to the NFL draft, because the difference between having a good kicker and a bad kicker is night and day. And I think Brandon Aubrey, I think he's one of the most potent weapons in the National Football League. And we saw it like 2 weeks ago at the end of the first half. Here came Aubrey trying out to attempt a 67-yard field goal against the Giants before the end of the first half. Now, Dallas got called for a penalty and knocked them out of the field goal range, but they were going to do that. And, I'll tell you, special teams, you met the Eagles, they had to block punt this week after 2 blocked field goals the week before. Special teams has become a greater emphasis here in the National Football League in the 2025 season. We got Howard Balzer, of course, contributor for Cards Wire over at USA Today. And let's talk a little bit about the Arizona Cardinals, who have been in one-score games each and every week. Of course, being on the wrong end this past week. Was it the Raiders 23-20 that they fell to, Howard?
No,
Seattle. Okay. And so they lose to Seattle 23-20. But good news is they have the Tennessee Titans this week. But let's talk about last week. Looks like they're going to have some backfield issues moving forward, in addition to James Conner.
Yeah, no, that's the big question. And there's a lot of, I don't know if concern is the right word, but it's unknown right now because, the Cardinals had an extra day of practice this week after the, quote, mini bye. And so they had an hour practice on Monday, which the media is allowed to be at. And all of a sudden, Trey Benson is not on the field. And so he also, didn't play in the team's final possession. Now, they were down by a touchdown. Emari Demercado is their third down back. He's a better, Benson does a nice job in passing situations as a pass catcher, but you also need that guy in there that you're comfortable is going to block if the ball's not going to that guy. And so Demercado is very good at that. And he ended up scoring a 7-yard touchdown on a quick pass to help tie the game there late. Well, Benson didn't play on that possession, so that raised some eyebrows. But then when he wasn't there at practice, and naturally you get no information because when the question's asked is, and Jonathan Gannon usually speaks before practice, and so you don't even know who might not be out there, especially on the first day of the week. You don't know who might be out there that you weren't even aware, perhaps got an injury in a game or something might have happened. And so when he was asked, he said, well, it's day to day, and you guys will get the information on Wednesday on the injury report. So today we'll find out later if he's on the injury report, if there is an injury, if there's some other reason he missed. But the other part of that is that on Monday, the Cardinals also signed Michael Carter to the active roster from the practice squad. And then they signed Dearness Johnson to the practice squad spot that Carter was vacating. But then they also yesterday reported tryouts with 4 other running backs. So it raises eyebrows and says, is there something going on with Trey Benson? And so we'll know if we'll find out later today if he's on the injury report. But yeah, after the loss of Conner, that was a tough one. And they became pretty much a passing team in that Thursday game against Seattle. Obviously, it was a short week anyway. You're not able to work on a lot of things. But they went into that game knowing that they were going to have a hard time running without Conner, going against an excellent run defense in the Seahawks. And so they were much more a passing offense in that game. And then it got even more so later when they were down by 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. And the passing game didn't work that well for the first 3 quarters. Fourth quarter, it did. So it's going to be very interesting to see what their approach is on Sunday against Tennessee. And, Marvin Harrison, who just had talk about a roller coaster in his first, 3, 12, 15 quarters. And then all of a sudden, in the first half of that game against the Seahawks, he just looked lost out there. It looked like his head wasn't in the game, with drops and miscommunications and different things like that. And 5 targets in the first half and only 1 catch for 8 yards. And that came on the first play of the game. Then all of a sudden he woke up in the fourth quarter and had some big catches and a tremendous catch in the end zone that he high pointed. And people saw it right afterwards. He went to his knees, and you could almost feel the sigh of relief that he was breathing in that after making that play. So the big question is, will that continue? Because they need him for that overall passing game to work.
Yeah, you could see it weighing on his mind. He looked pretty dejected over there on the sidelines, especially after that drop that led to the interception. But a tale of two halves for Marvin Harrison. All right, they get the Tennessee Titans here this week. Cam Ward says they're playing like ass. Those are his words, not mine. One thing I know is Jonathan Gannon, he tends to have a good game plan scheme intact against these rookie quarterbacks.
Yeah, and so, Nick Rallis is the defensive coordinator. Gannon, I mean, obviously Gannon's involved. He knows what's going on, but he has a lot of confidence in Rallis. They've had issues this, so far this season. The defense is better than it was, but they're, they have it, personnel issues at corner, although they did have Will Johnson back at practice on Monday, who had missed the previous two games. So they're better on defense than they've been. But as what happens with a lot of defenses, the one thing that they're not able to do consistently is take the ball away, and then they give up explosive plays. And that happened in that Seattle game. I mean, they did an excellent job, against Kenneth Walker III in the running game. But then in one of the touchdown drives, three straight plays, Walker had explosive plays, and it led to a touchdown. And so, I mean, that happens around the NFL. Obviously, you're not going to eliminate all explosive plays, but the numbers that they've been giving up have really affected the games that they've played. And, it happened against the 49ers the week before, when they were doing a real good job in the passing game, weren't giving up explosives, weren't even doing that in the running game. They kind of held down Christian McCaffrey. But then in the final drive, McCaffrey just took a quick screen to the left, and all of a sudden, boom, he was down the field for 20 yards, and that got them into pretty easy field goal range for the winning field goal. And Nick Rallis said afterwards, he said, the play they called did not fit the defense we were in. And a lot of times coaches won't reveal that, but we all know that that's what happens a lot of times. And it also points to me to all the, well, of course, you never hear, it's always interesting to me, you never hear fans saying, well, the defensive coordinator didn't call a good game, right? You never hear that comment from the outside on defense. You always hear it on offense. If the offense is struggling, it's the offensive coordinator, right? It's the play calling. It's all those things. Well, here's Rallis admitting that they didn't have the right call for the defense. Is that a bad play call? No. Teams call things, offensively and defense, believing what the other team is going to do. And then a lot of times there's adjustments but you don't have a lot of time to make those adjustments. And sometimes one player might not hear the adjustment or get it, and all of a sudden maybe that player isn't where he's supposed to be, and it leads to an explosive play. Gannon also talked this week, Rick, and I'm sure this is a lot of teams. He said, we've had problems with when adjustments are made that players that we felt, players came in unblocked that we thought were accounted for in either the play call or the switch that was made. And that's the thing that, hey, let's be honest, no one knows. Fans don't know. We in the media don't know when a play was changed or it was adjusted, or which player didn't do the right assignment, which led to a bad play. Those are the things that affect games more than which play is called, because after that, it's up to the players to execute it. But a lot of times it's the other team. The other team has a say in it. But we all know that fans and people look at teams in a vacuum of the team they're rooting for or they're covering. You very rarely hear. Have you ever heard anyone ever say after their team won, say, well, gosh, we were lucky to win because the other team's play calling wasn't very good, right? You never hear that about the other team. It's always, we did what we were supposed to do, right? But when it's the flip side, when it's your own team, you have to find someone to blame, and it usually is the play caller. But there's so much more nuance to it than that I think most of the noise that's out there in social media, whatever it is, has no clue, or does have a clue, but doesn't even care because they want to be able to blame somebody and fire a coach.
Yeah, well, Gannon did face a lot of criticism, even though he was doing a good job in Philadelphia. They were really on him here, and
Yeah, I
he
know.
did, he did talk a lot about explosives, though. That he's fixated on explosive plays and limiting them, and obviously the offense is going to be needing them a little bit more. We were going to do some Hall of Fame debate. We already went overtime. Maybe we'll save it for next week and give us a little bit more runway to really get into it, because I think we're going to need some more time on that. But while I have you here, tomorrow is a wild NFC West matchup. We got San Francisco visiting the LA Rams, and Brock Purdy now with his toe may not be able to go. It might be Mac Jones. It might be Adrian Martinez, but obviously the Cardinals are going to be watching this one on Thursday night. Give us a little quick take on how you see this one.
Yeah, I mean, it's somewhat a toss-up, although the Purdy thing, I think, speaks to the issues that there are in the NFL when you have these Thursday games. And Kyle Shanahan alluded to yesterday, the short week and the quick turnaround makes it very difficult for him to be able to come back, get the treatment he needs and have an extra few days before game time. I mean, heck, it affected the Cardinals last week in their passing game because Zay Jones suffered a concussion against the 49ers, and there was no way he was going to clear the protocol in time to play a Thursday game. If they had played on Sunday, he probably would have been able to play. Now, how much difference it makes, who knows? But it definitely affects player availability when you have these Thursday games, obviously after a team has played on Sunday. And that although I'll say this, the 49ers have won games with Mac Jones. And so it's not like you're in a bad spot because of that. You'd prefer to have your main starter, but I think they'll probably be fine with Mac Jones. And so I think this game's kind of a toss-up. Like you said, it's a big divisional matchup with three teams now in the NFC West at 3-1, and the Cardinals at 2-2. And so I'd probably favor the Rams somewhat in this game. Obviously, the 49ers also lost Nick Bosa from the game last week.
Yeah.
And the Rams are a pretty healthy team, which is, even unusual this early in the season. So I would probably favor them. And Puka Nacua is, once again, I mean, gosh, the guy just rolls off 100-yard games like it was easy. I mean, it's just, it's just pretty phenomenal what he's able to do. But it should be a heck of a battle on Thursday Night Football.
Puka Nacua on pace for 1,964 yards. So he's chasing 2,000. And, the way I understood it was if because Mac Jones is also banged up. And the way I understand it is Jones would have started on Sunday if he was healthy enough to go. And I think they had to elevate Adrian Martinez from the practice squad. But something we'll have to just keep tabs on here in the next 24 hours, as the 49ers for the second year in a row have been bitten by the injury bug. It's been unbelievable.
Hey, real quick point, because I don't know if you've seen this, because I believe you were on the air when this announcement came through. Maybe it was a little earlier, but Dylan Gabriel has the start for the Browns in London this week against.
Oh, is it the London game? I knew Gabriel was getting the start. I always lose track of these international games, so it's going to be a London affair. Okay.
Yes, and the Vikings playing 2 games in a row overseas, in Dublin last week, of course, and then they stay overseas and switch over to to London to play this game. And hey, they're going with Dylan Gabriel. So could Shedeur Sanders be that far away? I mean, I think it would be surprising if he didn't get some games this season, but they're going with Gabriel on the start, taking the long trip across the pond. So it'll be interesting to see how that one goes early on Sunday morning.
Yeah, it'll get the cakes and eggs ready out there in the desert. I mean, it's early here, 9 a.m. kickoff, so 6 a.m. out there. So Dylan Gabriel making his start in London, taking over for Joe Flacco, who's thrown 6 interceptions through the first month of the season. And yeah, I think it's only a matter of time before Shedeur Sanders gets a look-see. At some point, you want to know what you have in-house. Obviously, Joe Flacco is not going to be here beyond this year, I wouldn't imagine. So the mistake by the lake continues for the Cleveland Browns. What do you got coming up over at Cards Wire, Howard, before we let you go?
Well, just staying on it each day, and had a story the other day on Marvin Harrison and, the big I wouldn't say the big game, but a nice fourth quarter. And, will that continue? And, just staying on it with them. And, you always hear everybody talk about trap games. And so when you're playing a team that hasn't won in the Titans, and you hear all the accolades from coaches and players, oh boy, all you have to do is put on the tape and you see that this team isn't as bad as it looks, and things like that. But and obviously even teams with bad records have a certain amount of good players, but anyone's capable of those explosive plays. And that's what the Cardinals' challenge is going to be, because I know amongst the fan base there's a certain amount of angst. I mean, I don't know that anyone expects them to lose, but in the back of their mind, they're going, oh, my goodness, if they lose this game, then everyone will be saying the season's lost. It's over. It's done. Don't even play the remaining games of the season. So we'll see how that one plays out.
Yeah, I see a matchup of two offensively challenged teams in this one. So we'll see. Maybe it'll be a defensive battle, but always appreciate the time. We'll do it again next week. We'll get in the wide receiver Hall of Fame debate that we wanted to do, but I want to make sure we have the appropriate time to do that because there's a lot to get to in those conversations. So always appreciate the time, H-Bomb.
My pleasure, Rick. Take care.
All right, there he is, and there he goes, Howard Balzer.